Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Destination Truth. I'm your host Tyler Warden, and if this is your first episode, you should just know that Destination Truth basically investigates anything that is surrounding philosophy, culture, or most importantly, conspiracy theories. So I'm digging into something new today, and this episode is about what you need to know for the future regarding Brett Kavinaugh as our 114th sworn-in Supreme Court Justice. Let's get into it. So, let's start at the beginning. Why exactly does Trump want Brett Kavinaugh as a Supreme Court Justice? Well, I looked into his past, and I can tell you that he is the exact kind of a man that Trump will want for draining the swamp. He is going to be good at it, trust me. In fact, in his earlier career, he's actually one of the very few that was willing to potentially risk his job to investigate the death of
Vince Forrester.
Now, if you don't know who
Vince
is,
Forrester,
shame on you. But seriously, you should look into it. Simply Google the Clinton body count. I think it's over 125 people at this point. And Vince Kavanaugh was,
Vince Foster
was one of the first and most prominent characters on that list, who was very close to Hillary Clinton and was most likely one of her lovers. Nonetheless, Vince Vaughn was a lawyer and a White House aide who mysteriously died in a 2 bullets to the head suicide, and he was found in a park where there's no bullet casings and no blood found, what looks like basically a suicide where he was shot in the head twice by someone, not himself, and then dragged to the park or taken there. Nonetheless, it was ruled as a suicide and the case has been closed. He was one of the few people that really wanted to investigate that further and was basically reprimanded and forced to stop doing so. Secondly, he also had an opportunity to basically ask questions of Bill Clinton, and he wanted to get very specific and almost graphic to the point where he again was basically leashed because he wanted to basically expose Bill Clinton as a sexual predator. So he is not a fan of the Clintons, and he definitely is what I would call a stark opponent to the Clinton dynasty, actually. So definitely a swamp drainer type. Secondly, Brett Kavanaugh has actually been basically in the line for doing this for quite some time. He has all the experience you could ask for. He was actually appointed by George W. Bush Jr. To be in the Federal Supreme Court of Appeals, and he's been there for quite some time now. And before that, he was also a judge. Before that, he was like a clerk to the Supreme Court. So he has a lot of experience. He's been doing this his whole life. He went basically from lawyer straight into trying to become a judge. So that's what he wanted to do, and he's been doing it well. Also, his rulings have also basically always been pretty conservative, which is why we see this backlash from the left right now. The left basically probably scoured his past for something like Christine Blasey Ford for quite some time because from my investigative work, it doesn't look like this accusation actually holds much water. In fact, there's nothing except for supposedly a polygraph that was not actually used as evidence, but supposedly it has been taken and she passed it. So that is alarming because a polygraph works the majority of the time, but there are definitely ways to trick a polygraph. And this has been verified many, many times before, so that is not even debatable, in fact. So it is possible that she raised these accusations and was trained to pass a polygraph. I do not know. Something else I do not know is whether Brett Kavanaugh does have any actual association with either Freemasons or the Skull and Bones, but he did go to Yale University. He did sports there. He also wanted to go into law right away, so he hasn't changed very much. He knew what he wanted to do, and he's been doing it. And from what I've also been able to gather is he is actually a man of extreme integrity, and I use that word specifically because there are very few like him these days. If you have watched the entirety of the Senate hearings, you'll see that he is a man of extreme integrity. He is almost one of a kind. If we lived hundreds of years ago, I can almost guarantee he is the type of person that would have lived his life being one of the individuals that say, I do not tell a lie, and they actually hold to it and don't tell any lies. He is one of those kinds of people, trust me. But nonetheless, so I've already looked into why Trump wanted him, but I'm going to go even a step further and tell you some of the things that he has passed legislation on, or basically voted on, that has made an influence on the country already. And one of them is extraterritorial jurisdiction, and that is knowing when and where certain rights apply, especially in regards to human rights violations. This is very important. If you know anything about QAnon, you'll know that he's probably being elected so that if the Supreme Court gets involved at all with the draining of the swamp, that he will be there in place ready to go. And him being brought into the Supreme Court gives Trump all that much more power and ability to drain the swamp, because he has someone else in his corner that is in a whole different branch of government. So now, for the first time in some time, I would say the judicial branch, the federal Supreme Court, is actually leaning more conservative again for the first time in quite some time. So we've got the executive branch and the judicial branch, and the legislative branch, which is, you know, the House and Senate, is still kind of up in the air, but it's obviously leaning mostly conservative right now because of all of these lies from the left, basically not helping Americans in any way, and people are realizing that. So people are waking up. People are realizing that the left is not helping America, it seems. It is hurting America. It is destroying industry, and it is lying about it. And basically its excuses are always, you know, patriarchy, sexism, and racism. That's all that they have right now. And the left is continuously losing because each time that they're forced to realize that certain people on the left with them disagree with certain directions they're going in, instead of being like, oh, maybe we should renegotiate this, think about it a little bit, no, they double down, they double down, they double down. So they're losing more and more moderates. And the moderates go where? There's only really one place to go. It's either A, to the Republican Party, or B, to somewhere else where they will throw away their votes. And I am personally a libertarian. I am not registered as a libertarian. I'm registered as an independent. And I only mention this because if you are looking to redeclare your political party, the independent party does allow you to actually choose which ballot you want in elections. It is not true that you are forced to accept a provisional ballot, which are thrown away. That's right. One of my very first video ever you should look into. It has to do with why Bernie Sanders won California by a landslide, nearly 70%, and said corrupt Hillary took it away from him by very corrupt means, largely of which involved provisional ballots being thrown away. Anyway, let's get back to the point here. So getting back to the point, guys, Brett Kavinaugh was elected because of his amazing track record as to being very constitutional. So the reason the left is pushing back so far against him is that they have had an agenda for a long time to destroy the Constitution, take power away from the Constitution so that it can be a little bit more organic, or a living document, as they like to say, and they want to be able to change this document and change the laws and get rid of the Constitution. He is a constitutionalist, so that is not going to happen under his watch. He is going to uphold the Constitution time and time again. We've seen it with the First Amendment, upholding First Amendment rights, as well as the Fourth Amendment, as well as even limiting foreign citizen campaign contributions, amongst other things. Additionally, he also even passed judgment on the Second Amendment and gun ownership. Here's just one example I will provide, just so you know that I'm reading from Wikipedia even. On October 2011, Kavanaugh dissented when the Circuit Court found that the ban on the sale of semi-automatic rifles was permissible under the Second Amendment. Okay, so he's dissenting, saying that's not the case. So this guy is a conservative through and through and a constitutionalist. So if you're a libertarian, Most libertarians agree with most of what's in the Constitution, so it's actually very exciting to have him on the Supreme Court. So this is very good. He also, he's basically a Republican through and through. And I say that because, regarding national security, there are certain times where he actually does waive people's rights, which is strange because as a constitutionalist, you wouldn't expect that out of him. But he did pass that in 2009. He basically wrote a lengthy concurrence when the court found that detainees at Guantanamo Bay detention camp had no right to advance notice before being transferred to another county. They're terrorists mostly. Why would they? Most of them aren't even Americans. So, nonetheless, this guy's been very constitutional regarding civil liberties, First, Fourth, Second Amendment. I commented on other things. So, he's also an opponent, it seems like, to reproductive rights. So, that's something the left is also very scared about. And personally, I don't know how many Republicans or people on the right actually disagree with Roe vs. Wade, but I personally like Roe vs. Wade. I don't think it's unbalanced. I think it's balanced. I think it, basically gives women 3 months to decide whether they're going to abort someone or a baby, a fetus. After 3 months, it is in fact against the law to get an abortion, though it's happening. Now, if we could just go a step further and make sure that it's known that it is a crime to abort a living baby, a person, after the 3-month mark, then I'm for that. But Roe vs. Wade, I think maybe should be fine-tuned, but not taken away. So hopefully that doesn't happen. A lot of people are concerned about that. That is deeply concerning even to me, because I do respect women's rights and the right to life for babies. So, nonetheless, guys, in summarizing this, again, I cannot corroborate any ties to Skull and Bones, which is at Yale, which is where he went to school. So it is a little concerning that he has some connections to the Bush family, because the Bush family, or at least George W. Bush, is who got him into the Federal Court of Appeals, which got him what he's currently doing now. So, the Bush family is pretty tight with Kavinaugh, and overall, though, I think this is going to mean that the country is going to be moving in a little bit more of a conservative direction for years and years to come. It is a little alarming that the president has the ability to appoint these people, and then the Senate has the ability to basically vote on them for us, so that the American people don't have to constantly go to the ballot box and vote on this stuff ourselves. But overall, I say this is a very good thing for the country, as we've been going largely to the left for decades. And if you're a liberal, you may disagree with that, but that is definitely the case. If you look at like what the country looked like in the 1950s and then 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we went starkly in a very liberal direction. And so what we're seeing now is finally a little bit of a pullback or a slowdown. Liberals, you should realize that there's really nothing to fear other than perhaps getting rid of Roe vs. Wade. I think that's the only real concern you might want to have. Besides that, it's no one's going to lose rights. No one's going to be going to, death camps. All these theories of the left are completely bogus and laughable, quite literally. Trump is not totalitarian. He's not a dictator. I could go on, but I don't think I need to, because all of the claims of the left about him being racist, etc., are completely laughable. Just to give one example of him not being racist, why on earth would he have a driver who is black for the last 20 years? If he's truly racist, he would not have a driver that is black. Anyways, guys, I hope you learned something. He's extremely very good guy. I think he's of extreme integrity. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost dodged the most important thing of all. If you'd like to learn about the scandal, the sex scandal regarding Christine Blasey Ford, I looked into it, and just to go an extra mile in depth on it, I will just say I think the claims are mostly laughable. They're from basically 37 years ago while Kavinaugh was in high school. Apparently he went to, they say he went to a party, and it took a lot of effort on his part to corroborate from multiple witnesses that he was not even at the party that she claims that she was sexually assaulted. So on this one, I've watched the entire Senate hearing, and I've watched the body language of both Kavinaugh and Christina Ford, and I gotta say, based on body language and micro expressions, I'm sorry to say, but you know, Christine Ford, and I'm not going to call her a doctor because she's not a doctor of any kind of, she doesn't even have a doctorate. I mean, she doesn't actually have a doctorate. People are just trying to give her more reputation points. That's all the left is trying to do by calling her a doctor, but she's not a doctor of anything. She doesn't even have a doctorate. So that being said, yeah, that story I think is bogus, and I'm very glad that the Senate decided to rule with reason and evidence and the rule of law. People in this country are innocent until proven guilty. The left is trying to even get rid of that by basically pushing that believe women. Just believe them. Don't even worry about that. If a woman accuses someone, they're guilty. Don't look into it. Just accept it. Believe women. I mean, this is basically another way that feminists are trying to take more rights for themselves and push against masculinity and the patriarchy, you know. But as we do that, what you're seeing is just women, by and large, are socialist, and you know, our forefathers saw the danger in a lot of these things. Like true democracy, it is just as dangerous as it is good for a people. And so we do not live in a democracy, guys. Just to remind you, we live in a constitutional republic, okay? Which is basically based on representation, okay? So anyways, guys, that's it, I think, for this video. I think I've shared enough for you to understand that Vince Kavinaugh means the country will be leaning a tiny bit more to the conservative side, and when it comes to draining the swamp, he is the guy that Trump needed. So if there are going to be mass arrests, as QAnon is alluding to, those are going to begin shortly. That's all, guys.